Good afternoon, preppers. This is the most important video I have ever done yet. It is so vital you listen because literally, and I'm not kidding you, and you'll see your life may depend on this. Your life will depend on this, and time is short. And stick with this, stay to the end, because you'll definitely see where I'm going with that, because we need to prepare. We need to be ready for what's coming. And I'm not simply just willy-nilly saying, oh, this is coming, and you know what, hopefully it is, and just kind of guessing. Now, we understand that through history, and when we see things playing out in history's sake, playing out again, that that's something we need to really pay attention to. But you have to understand, for humans, a human nature thing is we have a very difficult time sometimes seeing the bigger picture. It's just a natural human flaw that we have, if you want to put it that way. And that's why we have an idiom. And by the way, idioms are always awesome because they tell the truth. It's one of those things that's like in plain sight. We don't think about it until you see the idiom. Like, for example, you can't see the forest because of the trees. So you're right in the middle of these trees, looking at these trees going on, but it's difficult to see that you're in a forest. And that's why we have that idiom, to help you understand that. Because when we talk about truth in idioms, they help us understand that human nature. Because right now, we have constant news in our face. And I believe that's why, practically speaking, every one of you are here with me. And that's why practically every one of you are here with me every day. So you almost never hear me say this, but please subscribe and follow along and hit the like button and such, because when you follow through all this, you'll start to realize that we're in that forest. It's not simply just about being with some trees and seeing what's going on here and there. But what we see as far as the world condition right now is escalating daily. It's escalating. It's getting worse. And while we sit back, practically speaking, most people pretend it's not even happening. Again, not necessarily you and I, but a lot of people are pretending it's not happening, and there's another idiom, they bury their head in the sand. Or another idiom that I love is that one about putting the frog in the pot. And I know a lot of you already know this, but you put a frog in cold water and turn up the heat, and the next thing you have is frog soup. But if you actually try to put the frog in the hot water, it'll jump out very quickly. So although we could get to the argument, is everything happening right now orchestrated? Probably so, but that's not the point. The point is preparations and understanding that we are in that frog and the water is becoming boiling right before our eyes. And although a lot of us are starting to realize, uh-oh, I'm in boiling water, we need to take action now. Time is short because of this. Okay, now here's the history part. All of the same thing happened. You need to understand, we love to learn from history because history will show it repeats over and over again. Everything we're seeing right now, practically speaking, happened in the early 1900s. Of course it did. There's all kinds of tensions between Germany, Austria, Hungary against like France and even England and such at the time. There's actually spilling over into Bosnia. And of course, we know about Archduke Ferdinand being assassinated in Bosnia, which basically was the spark that ignited World War I. But it wasn't just, I guess using it as a spark is a great analogy for the fact that the kindling was already there. The tension was already there. And because of World War I, because of many other reasons too, there was a world economic collapse and we get into the Great Depression. Okay, all that's history. That's nothing new, but stick with me. Because I want you to understand, and I think a lot of you already know this too, that out of that depression, we had some of the worst regimes ever in history of mankind. Nazis, imperialistic Japan, and we saw the Nazi progression. I think you know this. We saw the Nazis progressing and becoming worse, but the people were so sick of war. They were so sick of the atrocities of World War I, because that was a brutal, brutal war with the chemical warfare and basically something we'd never seen before. The people were like, we see the Nazis doing this. Hopefully they're just doing this for the German people. I really don't want to get involved again, because they were so tired of this. Isn't that kind of like how we feel it is today? We're so tired of war. We're so sick of the death. We're so sick of all these things. And especially in Europe, Europe does not want another war either. Japan had limited resources, because before we actually had Western civilization going into Japan, they were very isolated, and they start realizing, oh, wow, there's a lot of cool stuff out there. So they started importing a lot of things because the natural resources of Japan is very low. And as they started getting a taste for this, guess what? The world economy collapsed. And now Japan's stuck in a situation where they're like, uh-oh, what do we do? So their imperialistic nature, they started taking over other countries too. They started going around. Tariffs against Japan kicked in. Not to mention we had sanctions in place against Japan. And all of this was kindling. All of this was gas. And all we needed was that spark again to start the whole thing. And it did. Because we see the same thing in the world today. We have desperation. Just like then, that desperation was sweeping across the world. We're talking about just before World War II. There was worldwide hunger, worldwide famine, anti-Semitism on the rise. It was seriously at that time. Saber rattling with all the countries, military expansions and building. And it resulted in, of course, the rest is history, in a war that enveloped the entire planet. World War II, obviously. We saw it coming, but we did very little to stop it, even if we could have stopped it. But again, the people were so tired of war, they didn't want to actually do anything. They're just hoping. And again, just like today, they buried their head in the sand. So why is this video so important? Of course, because it's happening all over again. We're in the middle of that forest, lots of kindling. Just to kind of go through some of the things that are happening right now, it's in all our news headlines. Literally, countries are separating because of the war between Russia and Ukraine. More aptly put, Russia invading Ukraine. But we see countries saying, we side with Russia, we side with Russia, we side with Russia, we side with NATO, and we're starting to see the lines dividing. We're seeing blockade of fuel to Europe. It's going to be a really cold winter, and they said they don't have enough fuel of this. And because of this, Germany is actually heading for an economic collapse too, because they don't have enough fuel. Kosovo and Serbia, have you seen this? Tensions escalating there. Iran increasing military, limited fuel from Saudi Arabia, and a conglomeration between those and BRICS as well. The collapse of Venezuela, not to mention Argentina, Ecuador, Peru. Japanese prime minister assassinated. I don't know if you know this, China is trying to go into Japan now and trying to push socialism. North Korea getting involved, firing lots of missiles. I mean, granted, some of this has happened before, and you're like, oh yeah, they always do this. But you're just looking at a tree. Stop looking at the trees and understand the bigger picture here. China making their new military base islands, of course, wanting to invade Taiwan. Japan has now doubled their military spending before, which is actually goes against what's been going on since World War II. U.S. economy collapsing, having troubles with their military. Understand the frog is in the pot and the water is almost at boiling. We're almost there. And if World War I and World War II has taught us anything at all, it doesn't take much, just that little spark to ignite the fire, and next thing we know, we're in another world war. We're so sick of it, but yet it's right at our doorstep once again. It's all spiraling out of control, just like it did at World War II, spread across the entire globe. And here's the real kicker, and understand why Goshen prepping and why being prepared is so important. You have to understand that out of the world population, 80 million people, it's estimated, died in World War II. 80 million. Now, out of those 80 million, here's a kicker for you, upwards of 30 million were civilians, practically speaking, dying from disease and famine. Wow, that's like over a third. Over a third of the people who died in World War II were not because of the war directly, but because of disease and famine. Is that going to be you? So as we see this spark about to light this huge tinderbox and set the world on fire again, because it's coming, it is blatantly clear because we're in the middle of the forest, there is no better time to prep, because 1/3 of the people who died in the war before were from disease and famine. Are you going to die from disease and famine? We need to prepare. Prepare for the inevitable. And that's why we have Goshen prepping.